Okay, well, good morning, everybody. For those of you that went out and had a great run this morning, I hope you had a shower and now you're feeling all energized. I'm delighted to be back here on stage at SLIF. I titled my talk, "The Senior Living Value Proposition, a Continuum of What?" Now, I could have titled it, "Are We Being Bold Enough Yet? Part 2. Some of you may remember I gave that talk. I know Scott Stewart will remember it. We were set up to be outdoors for that, and all the talks were outdoors, and we were right here in this area, and it got a little hot. But my answer then, of course, was no. And I want to be similarly a little bit, not a little bit, very provocative today in my comments. So, okay, I want to start with two questions this morning. With huge demographic demand projected for years to come, I want to ask you, does this rising tide of more individuals turning 80 mean boom times are ahead for senior living? If you read a number of studies and reports and obviously public company reports and so forth coming out, it would say, oh, wow, just can't wait. Or might these numbers lull the industry into a false sense of security and make it ripe for disruption by outside players? So those are the two questions I would just want to pose to you to start off. Now, let me say that the point of my short talk with you this morning is to make sure that we are not lulled into a false sense of security. So I want to provoke you, I want to prod you, I want to push you. I don't expect you to agree with everything I have to say, but we need to engage this issue, folks. We need to engage this issue because we are primed to be disrupted, and there are a lot of folks seeking this opportunity to disrupt our whole sector. So let me be clear now, two disclaimers. Next. I'm not here to throw cold water on the opportunities ahead for our field and for our sector. I'm bullish on that opportunity. I want to be clear. But I'm not bullish on that opportunity if we continue to cling to the value proposition that got us here. I think that's a prescription for fading into oblivion. And it fails to recognize everything that's going on around us, from a new customer to a new way of delivering, to a new way of thinking about retiring, about aging, you name it. So I'm bullish on the opportunity. I'm not here to throw cold water, but I'm here to challenge our thinking about what that opportunity, how we seize that opportunity. Secondly, my second disclaimer is that I'm not just talking about the opportunity with so-called younger older adults, say 65 to 85, or what the industry has labeled, and someday we'll change this, active adult, or those that are seen as seeking a lifestyle versus a care-driven setting. Yes, there's a huge opportunity there, no doubt, but there's an opportunity also in the care-driven sector. And I would argue that it's actually for the care-driven sector, it is absolutely key, vital, that we get this issue right with regard to what is our value proposition and what is it we're really going to deliver to our residents. Because if we don't in the care-driven sector, the implications for our country, the implications for older adults, and because of a failure on those first two, the implications for the future of our industry will be severe. And I use that word severe deliberately. So those are my two disclaimers. So I had two questions, two disclaimers. Now, I want to leave you with 6 what questions. 6 what questions. And obviously, my thoughts on the answers to each of those questions. Again, don't expect you to agree, but I want you to hopefully engage throughout the rest of our time here and when you go back to your companies and your teams on these questions. The first one is, so what age are we talking about? What do I mean by that? Well, we know the first boomer, after all these years, the first boomer actually turns 80 in 2026. But average age of folks in private pay senior living, not entrance fee, life plan communities, 83 to 85. So that's 29 to 31. So 5 to 7 years ahead of us. So, but it's also important to remember that our customers, because they can afford private pay senior living, that means by definition they're wealthier. And because they're wealthier, they've had better access in terms of health care. And so in reality, they are folks, you know, whether you want to subscribe to the zip code theory of you know, I can tell you your lifespan by what zip code you live in. But the reality is the traditional customer for private pay senior living is, comparatively speaking, healthier. So that customer is 85 going, in many cases, going on 65, whereas in a different zip code, you'll have customers who are 65 going on 85. So you have Medicaid demand, for instance, at much earlier ages than you may, that Medicaid qualified customer than you would have in our sector. But that said, you know, in addition, not only are they likely, since they can afford our product, they've had better access to health care, so they're likely to be needing those care-driven services later. But there's one exception to that, and that one exception would be dementia care and dementia care services, because that's not strictly a matter that can obviously strike at anywhere in that age span, even though it's a greater statistical likelihood after age 85. But that said, that's our most expensive setting. And that's significant when I now go to my second question. So the first one is, what age? The second one is, what financial resources? What's the affordability of the product, and to whom? So what do I mean by that? Well, we've all read, we've all heard about, oh, this massive transfer of wealth, all this wealth in the hands of boomers. And that's true, but that being true, if you look at the latest wealth data, there's a fascinating thing going on, but it has huge implications, again, for our sector. All's written about this growth in wealth, and even recent articles about how this growth has been maintained by the upper income. But if you break it out by decile, there's only one decile that's seen wealth appreciation greater than inflation, and particularly greater than rate growth in our sector over the last 5 years, and that's the top 10%. They've had wealth growth in the neighborhood of 41 to 43%. Huge, huge wealth growth. But bear in mind, 4 years of rate growth at 4%, that gives you, 17, 18% growth in terms of the cost of the product. 4 years at 5% gives you almost 22% growth. So 17.5 to 22% rate growth. For the 75% and above percentile, they've had their increase in their wealth has been right around the low 20s. So it's barely kept up with the increase in our costs for our setting. And so this is really important. What does this mean? Folks, the forgotten middle has just gotten a lot bigger. A lot fewer people. Yes, there are going to be tons of people in that top 10%. No question. But it's now 10%. It's not 20%. It's not 25%. Now, there is the difference, obviously, of the adult children and what they can contribute. But if you look at the numbers, the ability of the younger Gen Xers and millennials to contribute to their parents' care costs is nowhere near what it was for the boomers. So just a few things to think about. So The other thing I would say here is we have a whole new industry that is rising up. I spent a day with a whole bunch of really well-funded folks, all from other sectors, all developing business models to disrupt our sector. That's their whole focus, is coming after the top 10% who don't want to move into our communities and offering them a model that they will want. So I would argue that one of the things I would posit is that what the country club was to the greatest generation in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, longevity clubs will be to the boomers in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I don't have time to define all that I mean by that. You'll get an inkling as I go on. But rather than golf and tennis, yeah, there may be a little pickleball in there, but it's going to be about longevity. It's not going to be just about relaxation and leisure. So, okay. Then my next what question is, what stage are we on? What stage are we on as an industry right now? And I think this is really important for us to understand. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to draw an analogy that used to work for the theater and plays. Because it used to be, the saying was, you open in New Haven, and then your goal is to make it and to play on Broadway. But you opened in New Haven because that's where crowds were small, spotlights weren't on, and you kind of worked out the production to be ready, hopefully, to be discovered. Maybe that one critic would come out from New York, write a rave review, and it would set you up to open on Broadway. Well, the last 30 years, all my friends in the industry, the last 30 years, we've been in New Haven, okay? We've been in New Haven. We haven't been main stage, okay? And we've been, and we at NIC, and me personally, we've been trying to make it to the big leagues. And we've been trying to convince investors, real estate investors, commercial real estate, that they should invest in this sector. And you know, we wanted to, in a sense, be treated not as that niche alternative asset class that maybe somebody talked about, but nobody really cared about. Well, guess what? We've now gone mainstream. We're now on Broadway. When we're on Broadway, one evidence, just in the last 3 or 4 months, NCREIF, National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries, has now broken out seniors housing as a separate property type in the NCREIF index. That's huge. That was unheard of and seen as absolutely unlikely 10 years ago, let alone 20 and 30 years ago. So we've arrived, but guess what? What does it mean to arrive on the main stage, to be on Broadway? The critics are bare, the lights are intense, the spotlight's always on, and there's no margin for error. Welcome to senior living in the last couple of years. If COVID wasn't enough, then on top of that, you've got the Washington Post series, Senate hearings. You know, I couldn't get the time of day from a Post reporter to be interested in writing anything about our industry years ago. And the New York Times wrote the obligatory once a year front page story on nursing homes. And that was the coverage of our industry. That's changed. But you know what? It's not an aberration. We've achieved our goal. We're now on the main stage. The scrutiny and the spotlight is now and will continue to be intense. And we have to adapt. If we don't, we won't survive. We will fail on Broadway. But what we're meeting, the needs we're meeting, are very real. The aspirations we're meeting are very real. So someone will step in to that. So my fourth what question then, from what stage are we on to what's the opportunity and for whom? And for this, let me just point to this slide. This is work of AgeWave, Ken Dykewald, and Edward Jones. But if you look at this slide, what you'll see is here are two perspectives on retirement, and I would argue on aging. The one on the left, their parents' notion of retirement, is what I would call a passive notion, and devolving into a negative view. It's a time for rest and relaxation. The way I put it, it's a time to fill your bucket list before you kick the bucket. And it's a continuation of life was, it's the beginning of the end. A new chapter in life is way down the list. But then look at their retirement today. And this is based on all kinds of surveys of thousands of different individuals. What comes to the fore immediately? A new chapter in life. It's an active view. It's a positive view of, and it's what I call a next stage view, not an end stage view. The one on the parents' retirement, that's an end stage view of my life. The one on the other side, retirement today, that's a next stage view. But we don't have a value proposition, folks, that's next stage. We have a value proposition that's end stage. And we'll either adjust or we'll get disrupted right out of business because the needs are real. No, and demand is huge. So my point here on what's the opportunity and for whom is that I think we're an industry at a key moment where we are ripe to be disrupted. And the question is your company and your organization going to be a disruptor, or are you going to be the disrupted? Because the disrupted usually go out of business, sometimes slowly, sometimes very, very quickly. Just ask Blockbuster or somebody like that. So what are 4 reasons I think we're ripe for disruption? First of all, there's huge demand. The demand's enormous. Secondly, it's too costly, though, by far, for 90% of the people in the market that need what we offer in traditional IL, AL, memory care, private pay senior living. Third, the customers dread having to move into our product for the most part because it's end stage, because of what it says about their life and their prospects. But lastly, and this is the point that concerns me the most, our industry, for the most part, thinks we're sitting pretty. Our industry, for the most part, thinks we're sitting pretty. And, you know, it might be, watch them come to us. Look at all that demand. Look at all those wealthy boomers. Look at what we have that they need. And that myopia, that hubris, has been the downfall of many industry leaders in other industries and many industry leading companies. So my next question is, what's our current value proposition today? I've already alluded to it. I would put it this way. We have the care you need when you or your family absolutely cannot live any longer without it. It's a continuum of what? It's a continuum of care. But it's a continuum that's defined by deficits and driven by decline, which then equates to an ongoing sense of loss of agency, purpose, meaning. It's identity shaped by what you've lost and what you are losing. And we are there to replace what you've lost to a certain extent. But we don't really replace. We don't replace meaning. We replace functional ability and cognitive issues. So then what's our promise? Our promise, and then we wonder why it's what I would call an avoidance product that people dread to move into. We'll keep you clean, safe, dry, fed, and toileted till you die. Compelling, you know, can't wait. Really excited. So I call this the avoidance model, and I'm deliberately contrasting here 2 different visions, which is also 2 different value propositions. One's filled with dread, the avoidance model. I'm pushed out of where I am and where I want to stay. And it's, as I said, it's very much driven, it's defined by deficits and driven by your decline. It's your decline that forces you to move in. And I want to contrast that then to an aspirational, or what I call pull model, that pulls you in and that's built around growth. So again, this avoidance model is why I think, and the fact that that is what we communicate, whether we mean to or not. We have lots of nice words and pretty pictures, but the reality is most people move in because of that care-driven need. But just think about it. Even in all the services we provide, we actually further the concept you're no longer capable yourself. And so the very thing that we promote as such a strength of our sector, you don't have to worry about A, B, C, D, E, and F, we'll do it all for you, basically says you're no longer a functioning human being. You've lost independent agency. And by the way, sense of purpose, meaning, belonging, it's tied to having that sense that I am still a contributor in life. If I'm not, I don't want to just be kept alive. I have no interest in that. Now, the greatest generation, my parents, my in-laws, they accepted that. And they were just grateful to have those additional years of what I call accidental longevity. Boomers want purposeful longevity. If we're not offering purposeful longevity, boomers are going to look for products and settings that do offer that. So, okay. So basically then, my last what is, all right, what can replace it? I call it a continuum of engagement and experiences that make life living. Boomers aren't interested in our saying we're going to add years to their life. They've seen their experience of their parents, and they fear that, and they dread that. They only want to know if we're going to put life in those years. If not, it ain't worth it. And what does that look like? It's not being fed and toileted, folks. That's not putting life in my years. And that's what's going to attract me. It's what I call next stage living. It's about growth. It means that, do we ask when somebody's a prospect or when they move in? Because bear in mind, the asking starts to change the mindset. What's next for you? What are your goals in the next year living? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to learn? What talents, gifts do you have to contribute? What's important to you to do in the next 6 months or the next year? So, many examples of that. A year ago, I got introduced to a group, Encore Palm Beach County, which in Florida, which basically coordinates volunteer efforts and opportunities, and also job opportunities for adults over age 50. And has partnered with the senior living community specifically to have that community in partnership with the coalition of nonprofits in the county to identify things that their residents at different degrees of mobility and cognitive level could do. What's the significance? It's folks feeling like they're contributors rather than just takers. It's folks feeling like they're problem solvers, not always being viewed as the problem. This is real. This makes a difference in people's sense of themselves. And if you read Becca Levy's book, basically what she's showing us is if you change that paradigm and give them that sense of purpose and meaning and that they have something of value to offer, not only will they live longer, an average 7.5 years, they'll be healthier during those last 7.5 years. So I'm running out of time, and because I want to get Fee up here. But let me just close then. I do believe that volunteerism is a key piece of this, an absolutely key piece of this. And Jill Vitale-Awesome is also going to talk about her citizenship model a little bit later. But that contrasting, what I'm basically saying here is that what personalized experiences, and bear in mind, tech today offers us the opportunity to do this in a way we couldn't before because we just didn't have the staff. What personalized experiences that are metaphors for being alive will we offer our customers? That's not playing bingo. That's not even just having a great luau or a great barbecue. It's a sense that I'm a contributor, not just a taker in life. And I'm a problem solver, not just the problem. So talk to me afterwards. I can give you names of one community after another that have seized on this idea of being, our residents are problem solvers. They're not the problem. And one of the first groups we have to change that mindset in is our residents. Okay? It's not that they come in all fired up. We have to change their very mindset. So this is why I think This represents this value proposition, and are really fulfilling it. It's truly bold. It offers an aspirational vision, and it's an opportunity for senior living and aging services to reinvent itself. That, to me, is a future with promise that can really meet the huge demand and need that's out there. Thanks a lot.